Tonight, we are just outside the House of Commons in the West Block, where just hours ago, the government tried to turn the page on the SNC-Lavalin affair. It unveiled a pre-election budget with lots of new spending. Instead, it was all the finance minister could do just to be heard.
And who was counting on us to get the big things right?
The opposition making it difficult to hear Bill Morneau. But here are some of the big-ticket items he announced. In all, more than $22 billion in new spending, including government help for first-time home buyers, a huge spending announcement for Indigenous peoples, more than $8 billion over 5 years. There's also more money for seniors and a big investment in helping Canadians train for new jobs. What's not there, any plan for a balanced budget. Tonight, though, we're going to break the budget down, what those financial promises mean for you and what that says about the government's priorities in this key election year. But let's begin with that noisy, chaotic speech and our David Cochrane as he wades through the drama to explain the politics.
Canada has never seen a budget day quite like this.
Order.
It's the new political dynamic. The finance minister trying to push through the SNC-Lavalin controversy.
It was a good reminder of what's...
The Conservatives howling in outrage over the Liberals' shutting down of the Justice Committee to deny Jody Wilson-Raybould another chance to testify. The Conservative point was loud and clear, and eventually Morneau was able to make his, a pre-election pitch to Canada's largest group of voters, millennials.
We also, though, know that millennials still see that the possibility of getting into the home market is very challenging.
There's new measures to help first-time buyers get that first house. Morneau is also cutting interest rates on student loans and boosting student job placements to help them break into the job market. But it's not just millennials. There's also help for older workers whose jobs are at risk from technological change.
Our government believes that Canadians at all stages of their working lives should have the opportunity to learn new skills to take control of the future.
Morneau's solution is money for training programs and paid time off using EI, a bottom line of $1,000 and 4 weeks off over 4 years to upgrade skills.
This budget is not a serious fiscal plan for the country.
The Conservative caucus walked out of the speech, ignoring skills training to focus on SNC.
In the days ahead, we will continue to highlight this government's cover-up agenda.
It's disappointing that the Conservatives actually don't care and don't know what's in the actual budget. We've worked very hard to deliver for the middle class.
This is a budget that gives crumbs to Canadians when this government has already given the entire pie to the wealthiest.
With the Conservatives out of the chamber, Morneau spelled out how he would continue the Liberal pattern of big spending to help ordinary Canadians, from millennials to low-income seniors.
We're enhancing the Guaranteed Income Supplement earnings exemption so that seniors who wish to work can keep more of their pay and benefits.
This was supposed to be the year the Liberals balanced the budget, but there are deficits as far as the eye can see. And that's the message to voters. It's a choice to live with the deficits or live without the programs. David Cochrane, CBC News, Ottawa.
Now let's look closer at some of those big budget promises, starting with help for those millennials trying to enter Canada's housing market. Cameron McIntosh examines how today's proposal will impact the buyers.
So here in this condo, this is our living room. It opens up in the back.
The biggest investment of her life so far. At 23 years old, Brianna LaFantasy is just getting into Winnipeg's housing market.
It's a little bit harder than I expected, a little bit scary.
With a tight budget of just $200,000.
Finding a home within my price point that is structurally sound that I would even consider moving into.
This budget bumps up the amount buyers can take from an RRSP to $35,000. It also offers a shared equity mortgage, up to 10% of the value of a mortgage to be paid back over time or when the home is sold. What's unclear, though, is what happens if the home goes up or down in value. And it's only on mortgages up to $480,000. That may work in a mid-sized market like Winnipeg, not so much in Canada's two most expensive markets, Vancouver and Toronto.
The view here is phenomenal.
Where 31-year-old buyer Mauricio Valderrama can tell you $480 doesn't get you in the door.
If there's something that I can take advantage of,
I'll consider it, but for what I've seen, it won't make an impact.
There are fears more lending could just drive up prices more.
First-time homebuyers do tend to have a relatively high debt load relative to income. We're going to be putting more people in that high debt to income bracket.
Oh wow, this is very nice.
Back in Winnipeg, the main hang-up for La Fantasy and her agent, what exactly are the government's terms?
Justin Trudeau wouldn't be quite your roommate, but he would be a co-owner of your home.
Right, and I'm not sure how I feel about that.
The federal government says details of the plan are still being worked out, but is committing to have it in place by September 1st. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Now to today's single biggest line item, and it reflects a core Trudeau government priority, and that's reconciliation with Canada's Indigenous peoples. The CBC's Katie Simpson looks at the significance of the big spend worth more than $8 billion over 5 years.
That there is no relationship more important to us than the one we share with Indigenous peoples.
Rebuilding that relationship hasn't been easy for the Prime Minister, but he's promising to continue the work by making reconciliation the single largest investment in his budget. Over the next 5 years, Crown Indigenous Relations gets $4.8 billion, mostly to pay for settling historic wrongs, including land claims. Indigenous Services gets $3.2 billion to eliminate boil water advisories and improve child health care. On top of that, over the next 6 years, more than $1 billion in loans for legal fees for settlement negotiations will be forgiven.
We have been focused on reconciliation with Indigenous peoples since day one.
The Liberals made similar promises in 2015, prompting a record high turnout of Indigenous voters. But since that election, a lack of consultation about pipelines and the rise and fall of Jody Wilson-Raybould as the first Indigenous Justice Minister have become issues that have frustrated some in First Nations communities. Despite those tensions, the Liberals hope this budget is seen as another step toward reconciliation.
So the investments we're seeing here are simply to bring First Nations kids up to the standard of other children in Canada. And even there, it still falls short.
The National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations says more work needs to be done, but
I see the movement in the right way. We just got to maintain the momentum now.
The AFN says Indigenous voters helped flip about 20 ridings in the last election. Given that swing power, it hopes all federal parties develop strong Indigenous platforms. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Ottawa. As you saw, Bill Morneau didn't have an easy time of it today, to say the least. We spoke earlier about the budget and the politics around it. Here is my conversation with the minister. I want to start with sort of a sense of what you were alluding to in the budget. And it did seem to suggest that there were some people in the world generally who feel anxiety, and maybe even here at home. What did you want the budget to do to address or reassure those people who do feel that, who feel worried about a variety of things?
Well, I think, even with the really good results that we've seen over the last 3.5 years, the 900,000 new jobs, the lowest unemployment rate on record, people are still, they're anxious, they're worried about a fast changing world around us. And so what we've said is we need to deal with those worries. And that's what we were trying to do delivering on this budget was take a shot at making sure people recognize that they can get the skills they need for the future through the training benefit we've put forward. First-time home buyers have a greater chance of being able to get into that home. Things that really make a difference for families.
Okay, let's talk about the first-time home owners thing, because I think that a lot of people will grasp onto that. How do you know that that's exactly what those young people need? You've increased, for instance, how much you can take from RRSPs. For a young person to have $35,000 in RRSP, it would be impressive already. Is this really what they need if they don't have a lot of money to begin with? How do you think it'll work?
Well, first, we've done a number of things. So it's not just that. We've expanded the supply by investing in rental financing to create more rental units. And we've done that RRSP 35,000, which is important for some people. We've also put in place what's called a shared equity mortgage, reducing their mortgage payments significantly. So for people that are just about to be able to get into the market, it gives them a sense of optimism that they can get there in a way that they might not have been able to do because they might not have the savings that you're talking about. So just enough might get them there.
You could have taken all this money that you've announced today and put it on the deficit. Why did you not do that?
Well, what we've done over the last 3.5 years is we've shown that when you invest in Canadians, good things happen. We put the Canada Child Benefit, we put more money in people's pockets, and our economy did well. We grew at a faster pace. We reduced unemployment. And so what we're doing is exactly consistent. We're investing in the long term of Canadians so they're more confident, so they can put more money into the economy.
Last question, is this something you are willing to campaign on? Do you think Canadians will buy it? Are as you head towards an election?
Well, we are going to campaign on what we've done for the last 4 years, investing in middle-class Canadians, proving the results. I am particularly pleased to see that we have the lowest unemployment rates that we've seen in more than a generation. I think when Canadians look, more Canadians are working, more of them are going to be optimistic because they can get the training that they need in the face of a changing world. Those are the things that people think about when they think about what they should do for the next 4 years. So it's not an election budget, but it's been 4 years to demonstrate that we've got Canadians' backs.
Okay, Minister, thanks for making the time. Appreciate
Thanks.
it. Budget Day makes Tuesday an At Issue Day, and they will be here for analysis.
Mr. Speaker, that our work is not done. We know that we need to deal with those anxieties and those challenges in a real and important way so that people can continue to have confidence in the future.
This is a budget that gives crumbs to Canadians when this government has already given the entire pie to the wealthiest.
This budget is not a serious fiscal plan for the country. It is a $41 billion corruption cover-up.
The government tabled its pre-election budget, hoping, of course, to change the channel. As you heard there, though, the opposition just wouldn't let them have it. So whose messaging was loudest, and what does the budget tell us about the Liberals' campaign strategy, if anything? At Issue is with me in the West Block tonight. Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, and Althea Raj. We're in like a basement area. But anyway, we're all here together, and that's what makes us happy. Let's start with the shenanigans. Conservatives won't like it if I call it that because they believe this is a serious matter. But let's talk about what they were trying to do today, trying to slow down the vote, trying to obviously successfully drowning out Bill Morneau. Was that effective?
Successfully or unsuccessfully? I don't think so. No. I think that on a day like this, if you're not going to like the budget, and there are reasons to not like the budget on substance, people would be looking for some sense of what a Prime Minister Scheer or a Prime Minister Singh would bring to the country. That's not what they got today.
Andrew?
I think there are other times when they can do that. I think their priority at this point, rightly or wrongly, was to say these are not normal times. This is not business as usual. We cannot go along as if we had not just witnessed what we saw today or couldn't see today, which was the committee meeting in camera and apparently not even discussing which witnesses to call, but simply trying to change the subject in the committee there, which is pretty contemptuous, it seems to me, of the opposition. So I think whether it succeeds with the public or not, we shall see. The public will judge. Yeah. But I think they were entitled to say this is not a normal situation.
Althea?
They may be entitled to say this is not a normal situation, but the tactics that they took in the House of Commons this afternoon by heckling during the entire finance minister's speech, saying, let her speak, let her speak. I mean, I was actually here, and you could feel the ceiling shake by the pounding on their desks. I mean, they look like children in a classroom who are misbehaving. And to Chantal's point, if you are looking for the government in waiting, I'm not sure that the Conservative MPs this afternoon really showed themselves to be the government in waiting.
Yep. Let's agree that tomorrow morning, on all of our media, you're going to see budget items and critiques of the budget and budget analysis. And there is nowhere where what the Conservatives did today fits in that frame. And I am not convinced, as I was not when they called for the resignation of the Prime Minister, that overshooting the target really scores points in the end.
I think that's right. Calling the Prime Minister to resign, I agree, was overshooting. I'm not as persuaded as it's overshooting. Again, the public will judge. But I think the opposition is not required to concede to the government's strategy of basically saying there's no story here, now we want to talk about budgets.
Sure.
There's still a story because the government hasn't answered anybody's questions.
Sure, but they do at some point have to say, here's what we think works in the budget and here's what doesn't. Maybe they'll do that tomorrow.
No, that's right. They certainly have to do so by, say, election day.
Okay, so let's turn to the substance of the budget. There certainly wasn't a big one-ticket item in there, a big flashy thing for us all to look at. I'm not sure I expected that anyway, given that something has to stick around for the platform. But what did we make of it overall in terms of a pre-electoral document, a document that is trying to reset the narrative? You want to start?
I thought it was, and I'm not casting judgment on the budget strategy, which is another kettle of fish, but I thought it was a smart political document that hit a lot of good points for the Liberals. It has overjoyed, and I'm not underestimating the impact of that, overjoyed the mayors of Canada's major cities in a way that I've rarely seen them so overjoyed, because it gives them suddenly an influx of money to do with what they want, and not what their premiers would want. And it also featured some chapters, a very long chapter on Indigenous reconciliation, that were clearly meant to send the message, if you don't like us, you're not going to see chapters like that and the alternative.
Yeah, it did seem, though, well, this is my thought, that they were trying to shore up people that they used to have, that they were spending a lot of time reaching out to people that they should just normally not have to go so far to get. I don't know.
That's right. Well, in particular with things like the mayors, you've got people who will then repeat your message. They aren't just going to be predisposed to you favorably, but they're going to go out and proselytize for you. It was an oddly slapdash type of document, and which is strange because they've got all these months to prepare it, but there were signature initiatives in there that were only barely sketched out. Now, maybe there's some master plan where they're going to fill in the details later and it's all part of the run-up to the election, but it felt like it had been kind of cobbled together in the Prime Minister's office. Some of these things I don't think have been thoroughly thought through, so that's point one. I think that's partly because revenues are coming in so fast that's all the government can do to keep up. It used to be finance ministers had the tough task of balancing the budget. Now the Liberals have to work hard to not balance the budget, and they pretty clearly made a decision there to deliberately sort of make a divide between them and the Conservatives on that. It's not because they couldn't balance the budget. But also it seems like maybe that some of the turmoil in the Prime Minister's office over the last weeks and months may have taken its toll.
I mean, David Cochrane said smartly, this is you either decide you want deficits or you want programs. And we're telling you, you want us to get rid of the deficit or you want programs. And we're telling you this is what we're giving you, programs, but we're not balancing the budget anymore.
Well, I think that's what Bill Morneau's been saying for the last 4 years, and he repeated that message again today. I mean, they had a revenue windfall in ways that they didn't expect to have all that income tax revenue come in, and they decided to spend everything. And yeah, some programs are not completely fleshed out, or you wonder if they've thought about maybe the consequences of their plan, like the home buyers program, for example. But other ones seem like they might just be building blocks for a future election platform commitment, like the Canada Training Credit, which is actually pretty small when you look at the numbers. The pharmacare program, it looks like they're laying the groundwork to announce other things. So they have to leave themselves a little bit of room, and they don't have a lot of fiscal room, so maybe there's just some future policy announcement rooms there.
It's a false choice, of course, deficits or programs.
Yes, I'm not saying it's just one or the other, but still,
the country is not going to go to ruin if we run small deficits, and neither is the country going to go to ruin if we don't run small deficits.
Right.
You know, we would have lots and lots of programs if the government spending was only $310 billion and not $325 billion.
But voters, and we've seen that time and again, do not actually reward governments for saying, I've balanced the books. If they did, Philippe Couillard would still be Quebec Premier, to name just one recent casualty of having balanced the books and gotten, where is he today? I am not too sure. So I don't think that they're building blocks as much as signals, and I read the budget and thought they still are planning to eat whatever is left of the NDP lunch.
Oh, yeah.
That's a choice that they have made.
Yeah.
So they've got nice words on pharmacare. I don't think they are really putting together a pharmacare program on the basis of what I saw. I think it's a lot harder than just saying, oh, we're just putting building blocks. But on that, on housing, they're trying to send signals that this is where we're going. And I was looking at some of the union reaction. In the old days, the unions did not applaud Liberal budgets. No. But a lot of them did today.
But I think the opposition would be well advised to get off the deficit. I don't think that's the issue that's going to win.
No.
I think what you can say is a lot of the spending is not well considered, is not proper role of government, and what's the thing that the government didn't talk about at all, which is growth, productivity, business investment, the things that are going to make for rising living standards over time, the things that particularly the provinces are going to need. The provinces need a growing economy even more than the feds do, because the provinces have this huge fiscal burden coming at them in terms of the aging population for healthcare. And if we continue growing as slowly as every projection shows we're going to grow, the provinces are going to have real fiscal
that's very depressing. so glad we have Andrew. Let's just do one go around on whether this is enough. You know, I realized they were going to do a budget anyway. All those things were going to happen. But if they are trying to reset the narrative and get people to talk about it and not SNC-Lavalin, will this do it? Or what do they have to do so that it becomes that, Althea?
I don't think we're going to be talking about the budget next week, but I think that we will probably be talking about some things that are in the budget in the months to come.
Right.
So in that way, perhaps successful. There are things there for women. There are things there for young people. There are even things there for seniors, which the Liberals won in 2015, but they look like they might be losing now. Yep. And so they really have carved out the electorate, and there is a little something for everybody. I mean, there were so many flattering emails in my inbox from every lobby group under the sun that there is like no consistent narrative in this budget, but there is literally something for everybody, it seems.
What do you think, Andrew?
I'm not sure I'm not sure we'll be talking about the budget that much in the days to come. I think it's entirely possible we'll be talking about the SNC-Lavalin affair. But the opposition needs more fresh revelations than news. But they've also got this business of the government shutting down the committee. I remember a week ago people were saying, you're too hasty, they've just put off the decision. Yeah. They clearly are not going to allow any further witnesses on that. And if the opposition can get some more oxygen in the story, then that can be killed.
Yeah, but it wasn't just the committee. It was Michael Wernick and McClellan being appointed it was like, let's shut everything down.
Okay, but at the end of the day, when you decide that you're going to change governments, and I thought this budget set the choices, because they are working, not only do they want to eat the NDP lunch, but they are setting themselves up against the Conservatives. Yes. That's the alternative. Yes. Unless the Conservatives do a better job of showcasing themselves as an alternative and not just we're going to go after the government on this, they will win the job of official opposition.
I agree that they have to do that, but part of winning power is also what do people think about the Prime Minister? And the Prime Minister's standing with the public, I think, has been materially hurt by this scandal and by other things before that. Yeah. If they can damage him enough, that is part of winning a power.
Sure, but the thing the Prime Minister said even before walking in today was the Conservatives don't have a plan. They're not talking about the economy. I mean, that was clearly sort of the trap that was laid for them, right? And at some point you have to pivot out of it, I would imagine.
That's right. So they can't just go on one message or the other, but I think the combination is feasible for them.
Last thought on that?
I mean, now we might be talking about this at the Ethics Committee, so maybe there is new oxygen on this issue. I think the trouble is the government has gone to great lengths to put this whole issue to bed. All the players have basically resigned or left. I think the question remains about whether Jane Philpott and Jody Wilson-Raybould should be still in caucus, and that will continue to percolate, I think. But in terms of fresh oxygen for the scandal to continue, I mean, everybody abroad looks at Canada and wonders what the scandal is truly about.
10 seconds.
And the real question is the divide between our fascination within the bubble going to be matched by public fascination? I'm not convinced that I see that happening.
Okay, thanks everybody. Good to see you in person in this weird basement location of the West Block. Before we go, be sure to subscribe to At Issue, the podcast. You can look for it on iTunes, any major podcast app, and our website, cbcnews.ca/.